Well, hello, and this is our second RE lesson for this term. And I'm just going to share my screen. Well, I'm hoping that you remember. Let's have a little think about what do you remember of what we were talking about from the first lesson. So if you remember, this term we are looking at the religion Judaism, and we're going to look at the special relationship that Jewish people have with God, and especially around this word, the covenant. So if you remember from the first lesson, we were looking at an agreement. So what is an agreement? And if you remember, we said that agreement is a promise that you will do something. Okay, and at the end of the last lesson, I said I wondered if you could come up with a family agreement. I wondered, what did you agree to do? What did your family agree to do? Okay, so we're going to move on then in this lesson. And today, so in this lesson, we are going to find out when Judaism began. We're going to find out about a man called Abraham, and we're going to think about why the story of Abraham is special to Jewish people. Okay, so just as sort of a beginning part of this lesson, I want us to have a think about that. Jewish history begins with the covenant, the agreement, the promise between God and Abraham around 1812 BC. And the Jewish people consider Abraham to be the founder of their religion, of Judaism. So we're talking about 4,000 years ago. And Jews believe that there is one God who not only created the world, but with whom every Jew can have a personal and individual relationship. So there are some similarities between Judaism and Christianity, in that Christians also believe in one God, and they also believe that God created the world. Okay, so the story I'm going to tell you took place in the part of the world called the Middle East. So if you have a look at this map here, so this is a map, this is a picture of the world. We're here, this is us here, this is the United Kingdom, so this is England here. This then here, this part here, this is Europe. And the part that we're thinking about here, this is the Middle East. Okay. Now, this part of this here has been blown up over here. And the part that we're going to be thinking about is a place called Canaan. Okay. Now, this is an old map and it's got some old names on it. So, obviously, this is the Mediterranean Sea. We've got the Black Sea. We've got the Red Sea here. So, this place here is Egypt, and that name hasn't changed. Over here, we got Mesopotamia, which is now called Iraq. Here, we've got the Arabian Peninsula, and that's now known as Saudi Arabia. We've got Anatolia, which is now known as Turkey. And the red bit here, this place here that's highlighted here in red, that's Canaan. That's the area that we're going to be thinking about in the story that I'm going to share with you. Okay, so the story of Abraham is from the book of Genesis. Okay, and you can actually find it in Genesis chapter 17, verses 1 to 7. Now, I don't know if you can remember that this story can be found in the Old Testament part of the Bible. So the Bible, so you have the Old Testament and the Torah, which is a Jewish writings, are the same. They have the same stories, the same ideas in it. Okay, so you can find lots of the stories that you Jewish people hear about. We can also, Christians also know those stories as well. Okay, so here's the story. Long ago, there was a man called Abraham who lived in a place called Haran. He owned many different animals, including sheep and cattle. Abraham was a good man who lived with his wife Sarah, but they had no children. On one day, God visited Abraham to give him a message. I want you to pack up all of your things, Abraham, and leave your home. He wanted him to go to a new land. He made a promise to Abraham. I promise I will bless your family, he said. Abraham trusted God and moved to a new land. Now, the thing is that it's important to remember that some people at this time, when we're thinking about this time of this story, believed in lots of different gods. They didn't believe in just one God. Okay, obviously some people did, but some people didn't. And that's something to remember. It's an important part of the story. Now, Abraham, who was now 75, and his wife Sarah packed up all of their belongings in the land of Canaan and moved to a new land called Canaan. One night in Canaan, after a hard day's work, God appeared to Abraham again. He told him to look at the sky and count all of the stars. He explained that would be how many descendants he would have. Abraham told his wife about the news. She laughed because she believed they were too old to have children. God reminded Abraham of his promise. So what that means is that in the story there, God had promised Abraham that he's going to have children. And he then promises that he's going to have many descendants. That means he promises Abraham that Abraham will have children. His children will have children. Those children will have children, and go on and on and on. So if you think about your family, they've got mum and dad, you've got grandparents, you might have great grandparents, there would have been great grandparents. So that's what God's saying in this story to Abraham, that you will have a child, and then your child will have many children. So in the years to come, you will have a big family. Now, 3 visitors came to find Abraham and Sarah. They told them they were messengers from the Lord. The visitors told Sarah she would give birth to a child. Sarah was now 90 years old. Months passed and Sarah and Abraham did go on to have a baby, and they named him Isaac. They remembered the promise God made all those years ago, that if they moved to a new land, he would bless their family, and they thanked God for his gift of Isaac. Okay, so that was a simple story. So we're going to think about now how that story is important to Jewish people. So first of all, we need to think about what is the promise that was made in this story. So you might want to pause the video here and see if you can remember what was the promise, what did God promise he would do, and what did Abraham promise he would do. So in the story, God told Abraham to move to Canaan with his wife. And if Abraham did this, then God promised to give him a baby. So there was an agreement there. So Abraham agreed to go to Canaan and live there with his wife. And God agreed that if he did that, he would then give him a baby, which he did. So why is the story important to Jewish people? Okay. The story is important because Jewish people believe it shows the beginning of Judaism. So if you remember at the beginning, at that time, many people believed in lots of gods and not one God. So God talking to Abraham and asking him to move to Canaan was a way for God to create a new place where people only worshipped one God. So that's why God wanted Abraham and his wife to move to a new land so that he could then start this new religion, and that's where Judaism started. So God made the promise to look after Abraham and Sarah then, and Jews believe now that he will always keep his promise to them, now and forever. That's what Jewish people mean. Okay. So your activity for here, all I would like you to do, you've got the silver, gold and the platinum. The silver and the gold are sort of follow on from each other. So the silver is that you can just draw a picture and write a sentence to explain the story of Abraham. So here you could just draw a picture and you could just write, God promised Abraham and Sarah a baby if they moved to Canaan. The gold bit is just sort of extending those sentences a little bit further and thinking about, or you could draw a story map and explain, draw some pictures and then write some sentences underneath. The platinum is to reflect on this question: why is this story important to Jewish people? And we thought about it, it's important to them because it shows the beginning of Judaism. It shows the beginning of their religion. So we might just go back and have a quick recap of the story, might help you. So if you remember that there was a man called Abraham and his wife Sarah, and they lived in a place called Haran, and they were happy there, but sadly they had no children. Lots of people in the area where they lived believed in lots and lots of God. But Abraham believed in one God, and God spoke to Abraham and said to him, look, I would like you and your wife, Sarah, to move to another land. And if you move to this other land, then I promise you that I will give you a child. So Abraham believed in God and wanted to do what he asked him to do and trusted him, so moved with his wife to Canaan. Now they set up camp there and they lived in Canaan, and God kept saying to him, don't worry, I'm going to keep my promise, you will have a child, and then eventually there will be lots and lots of people living on this land who will believe in me. And 3 visitors came again to see Abraham and Sarah and explained that they had been sent by God to say to Abraham, don't give up, keep believing, and you will have a child. And that is exactly what happened. Abraham had kept his promise and stayed in Canaan with his wife, and God kept his promise and gave them a child. And Jewish people believe that this is the beginning of Judaism, because they then stayed there, and then for many, many years after, lots of people then came to live in that land, and they believed then in God, in the one God, and that's how the religion of Judaism began. So that then obviously is your task. So drawing a picture and writing a sentence, drawing a picture or retelling the story, and then maybe having a little think about this question. Why is it important? Why is that an important story to someone who is Jewish? Okay, and again, I look forward to seeing some of your work.